Jumping in and picking things right back up. We're still disassembling things. We've got our subframe off, and we're going to go ahead and take off the airbox here, take a look at the injectors, the throttle bodies, and everything else on the inside. So quick time lapse here of how that stuff comes apart, taking off the map sensors, making sure that they're clean, fuel lines, all the stuff that attaches here. Really, it's not too difficult of a deal. So taking a look here at our internals of the airbox, we have our throttle bodies, which are pretty neat as they change length for the venturi based upon load and speed and that kind of good stuff, which is all calculated by the ECU. So pretty cool design, pretty straightforward. As you see up front there, that's where our air inlet is from our air filter. We'll take a look here at the injectors. It's at the top of the airbox. So once the airbox lid comes off, the fuel rails will plug in. So we'll rotate this over. So you can see that the fuel lines go to the top of the airbox here, and those are where the injectors just dump fuel straight down into the throttle body. So pretty cool design. Everything looks to be pretty good, so we're going to throw this thing back together with a quick time lapse. You can see it's not that difficult to do. Really, it's just connecting a lot of connectors, right? Electronic map sensors. You'll see that we just pulled over the wiring harness from the upper right and just flopped it right back down, so you need to disconnect it. So super easy to do yourself. Everything's labeled. Don't be intimidated to try it and just take a few pictures, and I'm pretty sure you can knock it out. Moving on to our subframe, we'll take a look here. We're kind of pointing out that the subframe for this aftermarket DB holders is much different than the stock one. So here's the stock bolt that goes in for the stock subframe. The aftermarket bolts that you're going to have to purchase are going to be longer than the stock ones, quite a bit. So you see there that the boss, where that one bolts up to the frame, is much different. So here's a side-by-side comparison. The stock bolt versus the ones that we had to source to make sure that we have enough thread to go in there and a good shoulder so all those threads aren't wearing on the inside of the aluminum. They are different from the cylinder head versus the frame, so do check that and make sure your measurements are good. And with that steel going against aluminum, make sure you get some kind of washer on there so you're not going to have any galling when you install them. So again, just double check the bolt length if you have an aftermarket subframe, and make sure that whatever you get is going to be appropriate in length and obviously thread pitch and size. So these two are actually slightly different, with the head side being a little shorter. Fuel tanks. Well, we have yet another fuel tank, and this is the third one that I've got, sadly. As you can see here, this one's got a little bit of road rash, a little bit of damage. Not a huge deal, as there's no punctures or anything like that inside of it. A couple of dents, but no holes, so we'll run it. It is an eBay tank. The underside looks to be pretty good. What I want to see here is pay attention to the mounts. These mounts oftentimes will leak right there because that's where they mount up to the subframe. So really pay close attention to those mounting points. We've got the fuel pump pulled out. We've got our fixtures all taped up. So we're going to walk through here real quick, make sure we have some Loctite on those bosses that go into the tank so everything is secure, and we're going to make sure that there's no leaks, no holes, no stress marks around where those mount up, because again, that's where that tank bolts up to the subframe, and there can be a lot of force that gets transferred into the tank on a crash. So here's something you don't see every day. Here's the inside of that V4 tank. You'll see some of the vents and some of the piping where the fuel pump sends the fuel out to the fuel lines. So taking a look in this used tank, everything looks to be pretty good. There's no trash inside, nothing crazy, right? Everything looks to be in a decent shape. Nothing's pinched as far as the vent tubes. So everything looks to be pretty good, as well as where the fuel pump sits. That mounting surface looks to be good. So we're just checking everything out to make sure everything is kosher. So when we bolt it up, we're not going to have any unexpected issues. So we're going to go ahead and throw on our Spider fuel cap. Quick time lapse here, just how that stuff goes together if you haven't seen it before, but it's really pretty simple. So again, one of the things that don't be afraid of tackling yourself here at the house. So here's our fuel pump. We're going to reinstall that into our tank. We've got the electrical connector. Everything looks to be good with that connector. Obviously, so we got some O-rings that we need to lube up when we install it into the tank, and that's again where the fuel will come out and go into your fuel lines. We've got our fuel pickup there. Everything else looks to be good with the fuel pump itself. Use a little bit of lube for the fuel pump itself and the O-ring on there, as well as the one that goes out the fuel line. We'll just slide that fuel pump in nice and easy. Take a note of that O-ring, make sure it seats just nice and smooth. And now we just have a handful of bolts to throw in there. I like to Loctite all these. As you see, I'll use Loctite on a lot of stuff because these race bikes, I mean, they vibrate a lot. They go through a lot of shenanigans, especially if you yard sale them. So it's one of those things that, yeah, I think you should Loctite all that stuff. And not just Loctite it, but I'm a big fan of torquing everything to spec with a torque wrench. So you'll see we'll go through there, make sure everything's torqued down, do a nice even pattern. And there you have it. Fuel tank is reassembled, fuel pump in, ready to go on the bike. Well, we got everything running and bike started, which was good news, but we've run into a bit of an issue. I've got things cleaned off here, so you can take a look and see. But that right there, yeah, that's a hole in the tank. So this is the new eBay tank that I got. As you can see, as I tilt this thing over to the side, fuel was just pissing out of this thing. It was super hard to see and find. Just because there's a bunch of paint over it, right? But as we got the thing running, we could see that there's definitely a leak here. So we'll have to get this thing patched up. May involve re-welding the seams here or putting some kind of patch kit. So that was kind of an unfortunate deal. And it's actually on both sides. So it's not just the right side, but also we've got an issue on the left side as well. So both of these tabs look like they were impacted some kind of way in a prior crash, because obviously this tank is used, it is not new. So we'll see what we can do, but just buyer beware, right? On the stuff you get from eBay, sometimes stuff like this happens and you just got to work through it. But at any rate, it's a whole lot cheaper than a complete $4,000 tank. So we'll patch this bad Larry up and go forward from there. So quick follow-up here. We've got our tank all welded up by an awesome gentleman that was able to knock this out and make it look good. Way better than I could. I'm not an aluminum welder, so this is awesome. So you see here the initial crack that we found was welded up, and then some of that seam up here was also welded. On the other side, same thing. This seam went pretty far and had to be continued all the way up. So I'll flip that around for you right quick. You can see it's all the way up. That whole seam, I guess, was starting to leak a little bit. So fortunately, I know a good guy who does some really good work, and we're able to weld this thing up. So now we got all of our heat shielding on. Everything is good. We'll go ahead and throw the fuel pump back in and try this again. So in short, if you know a guy that welds, it's probably a good thing to have around when you are doing a lot of this stuff. So thanks, Rob. Really appreciate the work, man.